In Victorian London, a single orange could cost a full day's wages for a poor family. For the children of the workhouse, that one piece of fruit was their entire Christmas, and somehow they were grateful for it. If you use these to fall asleep, hit subscribe so you don't miss any. Comment where you're at in the time too. Kind of fun seeing all the different places. Someone from Iceland commented once and I had to Google what time zone that even is. So, we're going back to Victorian London tonight. But hold on, get yourself comfortable first. I mean it. Fix your pillows, grab that blanket. This one's worth settling in for. The bitter cold was the first thing Martha felt. Always the cold. It seeped through the thin blanket, through her nightgown, through her skin, right down to her bones. Her eyes flickered open to darkness, just the faintest grey light seeping through frosted windows. Christmas Eve morning in the London workhouse. She was 10 years old, though small enough to pass for 7. 3 years in the workhouse had stunted her growth, but not her spirit. Not yet. Up everyone up. The harsh voice of Mrs. Grimwig, the workhouse matron, shattered the pre-dawn quiet. No lazing about today, floors to scrub, laundry to wash, Christmas doesn't clean itself. Around Martha, 24 girls stirred in their narrow beds. The dormitory was a long, cheerless room with peeling paint and windows that let in nearly as much cold as they did light. The beds were arranged in 2 perfect rows. Military precision demanded even in sleep. "Martha," whispered a small voice from the next bed. "Is it really Christmas tomorrow?" Martha turned to little Betsy, just 6 years old and new to the workhouse. Her parents had died of fever only months ago. "Yes, it is. And you know what that means?" Betsy's eyes widened. "What? Might be pudding for dinner? And," Martha lowered her voice conspiratorially, "they say we might each get an orange." The word hung in the air like magic. Orange, the colour of sunrise, the taste of sunshine. Once a year, on Christmas Day, the benefactors of the workhouse brought oranges, one for each child, the single day of the year when something sweet and bright entered their grey existence. "What's an orange like?" Betsy asked, her voice small with wonder. Martha's chapped lips curved into a smile. "It's the most wonderful thing you'll ever taste, sweet and tangy all at once, and when you peel it, the smell is like heaven might smell." She closed her eyes, remembering. "My mum used to get us one at Christmas, before. Silence. Mrs. Grimwig was suddenly looming over them, her face pinched with annoyance. "Save your chatter for chapel, get dressed and downstairs in 5 minutes, or there'll be no breakfast." The girls scrambled out of bed, shivering as bare feet hit the icy floor. Martha helped Betsy with the buttons of her uniform, a shapeless grey dress with a white apron, identical to what every girl in the workhouse wore. Their breath clouded in front of their faces as they dressed. "You won't believe the size of the fire they'll have going tonight," Martha whispered to Betsy as they made their bed with quick, practiced movements. "Christmas Eve is the one night they let it burn higher than usual." "Is Father Christmas real?" Betsy asked suddenly. Martha's hands stilled on the rough blanket. The question hit her like a physical blow. She remembered asking her own mother the same question years ago in their tiny but happy home, before the fever took her parents, before the workhouse. "Course he is," she said firmly, "but he can't bring much to the workhouse. Too many children, see? That's why the benefactors bring the oranges instead." "Hurry up, girls," another shout from downstairs. Martha grabbed Betsy's hand. "Come on, don't want to miss breakfast. It's Christmas Eve porridge." "Is it different from regular porridge?" Martha grinned. "Nah, still tastes like wallpaper paste, but we tell ourselves it's special anyway." The dining hall was cavernous and cold, with long wooden tables and benches. 100 children sat in silence, shoveling thin porridge into their mouths. The only sound was the scrape of spoons against bowls and the occasional cough. Talking during meals was forbidden. From a seat, Martha could see through a doorway into the kitchen where enormous copper pots were already bubbling. Preparations for tomorrow's Christmas dinner. She nudged Betsy and nodded toward the kitchen. See? They're already cooking for tomorrow. Bet they're making plum pudding. A tall, painfully thin man in a black coat strode into the dining hall. Mr. Penge, the workhouse master. The children instinctively sat straighter. "Children," he announced, his voice echoing. "Today being Christmas Eve, there will be adjustments to the schedule." A murmur of excitement rippled through the room, quickly silenced by his stern glare. Work duties will continue until 4 o'clock, at which time you will return to your dormitories to wash and change for evening chapel. Following the service, there will be bread and cheese in the dining hall, after which you will retire for the night. He paused, scanning the room. "I expect exemplary behaviour from all of you. Our benefactors have been generous this year, and tomorrow's festivities depend on your conduct today." Martha felt a thrill of anticipation. Benefactors meant oranges. Mr. Penge's reference to them could only be a good sign. After breakfast, the children were divided into their work groups. Martha and the older girls were assigned to scrub the entrance hall and main corridors. The work was punishing. On her hands and knees for hours, the harsh lye soap cracking her skin, the cold water making her fingers so numb she could barely feel the brush. "Heard they've got a whole crate of oranges coming," whispered Nancy, the girl working beside her. At 13, Nancy was one of the oldest girls and therefore a source of workhouse wisdom. More than usual, might even get a bigger piece this year. "Really?" Martha scrubbed harder, excitement giving her energy. "Where'd you hear that?" "Cook's assistant told me. Said she saw the order list in Mr. Penge's office. A whole crate from Covent Garden Market." "My fingers are turning blue," Betsy whimpered from Martha's other side. The little girl's hands were indeed an alarming shade. "Here," Martha whispered, taking Betsy's hands between her own and rubbing vigorously. "Got to keep the blood moving. Think of something warm. Like sitting right next to a fire with chestnuts roasting." "Never had chestnuts," Betsy said. "Me neither," admitted Martha, "but I've smelled them roasting in the street vendors' pans. Makes your mouth water something fierce." A shadow fell over them. "Less talking, more scrubbing," Mrs. Grimwig snapped. "Those floors won't clean themselves." The girls bent to their work again. Martha's back ached and her knees were raw from the hard floor, but she kept going. Christmas was coming, an orange was coming, just one more day of work and then a feast, by workhouse standards at least. As she scrubbed, Martha thought of Christmases before the workhouse. They'd been poor, her family, but happy. Her father worked at the docks. Her mother took in washing. At Christmas, they'd had a small pudding and, if the year had been good, an orange to share among the three of them. Her father would carefully peel it, dividing it into segments with surgical precision, making sure each piece was exactly the same size. "One piece of sunshine for each of us," he'd say, his weathered face creasing with a smile. The memory made Martha's eyes sting. She blinked rapidly, focusing on the floor. Crying wouldn't bring them back. Nothing would. The day crawled by. The children's hands grew raw from work. Their stomachs growled with hunger. Dinner was thin soup and a slice of bread, meagre even by workhouse standards, as if to make tomorrow's slightly more generous meal seem all the more magnificent by comparison. As promised, at 4 o'clock they were sent to wash and change for chapel. Change simply meant putting on their slightly less ragged uniforms, saved for Sundays and special occasions. The cold water from the pump in the washroom was like ice, but they scrubbed their faces and hands until they glowed red, knowing that cleanliness would be inspected before chapel. In the girls' dormitory, excitement buzzed like electricity. Christmas was a spark of light in their dreary existence, the one day when the outside world remembered them, the one day when they were children, not just workhouse inmates. "I heard the benefactors are coming tomorrow, wearing fur coats and jewels," one girl said as she braided another's hair. "I heard they're bringing a whole orange for each of us, not just half like last year," said another. "And pudding with real brandy in it." Martha listened to the chatter, her heart beating faster, an entire orange of her own. The thought was almost too wonderful to imagine. When the bell rang for chapel, the children filed out in 2 orderly lines, girls on one side, boys on the other. They were not allowed to speak to each other, except during supervised activities, and even then, interaction between boys and girls was discouraged. Martha spotted her little brother Tom in the boys' line. At 8, he was the spitting image of their father. Same dark hair, same serious expression. He caught her eye and gave a tiny, secret wave. She winked back, their private signal that meant, "I'm okay, are you okay?" He nodded, almost imperceptibly. The chapel was the one beautiful space in the workhouse. For Christmas Eve, it had been decorated with holly and ivy, and actual candles burned in sconces on the walls, a rare extravagance. The children filed into the hard wooden pews, their faces turned up to the warm glow of the candles. Mr. Penge stood at the pulpit, his tall figure casting a long shadow. "Tonight," he intoned, "we remember the birth of our Saviour in humble circumstances. Let his example of humility guide you in your gratitude for the charity shown to you, the undeserving poor." Martha tried not to fidget during the sermon. Mr. Penge droned on about sin and redemption and the virtue of work. She focused instead on the flickering candlelight, the smell of beeswax and pine, the anticipation of tomorrow. After chapel came the promised bread and cheese in the dining hall. It wasn't much, but the very fact that it was an extra meal made it special. Martha managed to sneak her piece of cheese to Tom when the supervisors weren't looking. Boys always got hungrier than girls, she thought. Then it was back to the dormitories. The workhouse quieted as darkness fell completely. Outside, snow began to drift down, turning London into a Christmas scene from a storybook, though the magic rarely reached inside these walls. As she lay in her narrow bed, Martha whispered to Betsy, "One more sleep till Christmas, till oranges." Betsy's eyes were already drifting closed. "Tell me again what they taste like." Martha smiled in the darkness. "Like sunshine, like the best day of summer captured in something you can hold in your hand. You'll see tomorrow." She pulled her thin blanket up to her chin, watching the snow fall outside the window. Despite the cold, despite the hunger and the work, and the dreariness of workhouse life, a small flame of excitement burned in her chest. Tomorrow was Christmas. Tomorrow there would be an orange. And for the children of the workhouse, that was everything. Across London, in a grand house on Berkeley Square, another 10-year-old girl awoke on Christmas Eve, but Eleanor Blackwood didn't feel the bite of cold. Her 4-poster bed was heaped with quilts and surrounded by heavy velvet curtains that kept draughts at bay. When she opened her eyes, a fire was already crackling in the grate, tended by a maid who had crept in silently at dawn. "Good morning, Miss Eleanor," said the maid Sarah, drawing back the curtains to reveal a world transformed by snow. "Happy Christmas Eve." Eleanor sat up, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Unlike Martha's dormitory, Eleanor's bedroom was a wonderland of comfort. Papered walls in soft blue, a thick carpet underfoot, shelves lined with books and toys, and a dressing table crowded with silver-backed brushes and crystal bottles. "It's snowing," Eleanor exclaimed, rushing to the window. Below, Berkeley Square was blanketed in white, pristine, except for the tracks of early delivery carts. "How beautiful," Sarah smiled indulgently. "Yes, miss, a proper Christmas snow. Your breakfast is ready whenever you'd like it." Eleanor turned from the window with a little frown. "Will father be at breakfast?" Sarah's smile faltered. "I'm afraid Mr. Blackwood has already gone to his office, miss. Banking matters, even on Christmas Eve, but he promised to be home by luncheon." "And mother?" "Mrs. Blackwood is still asleep. She was quite tired from the dinner party last night." Eleanor nodded, used to this response. Her father, Cornelius Blackwood, was one of London's most successful bankers. Her mother, Caroline, was one of London's most fashionable hostesses. Both roles required much time away from their only child. "I'll dress and come down," Eleanor decided. "The blue wool dress, I think." While Sarah laid out her clothes, Eleanor went to her window seat, kneeling to watch the snow continue to fall. 3 stories below, a ragged child was sweeping the street crossing, hoping for pennies from ladies and gentlemen who wanted to keep their hems clean. The sight made her think of something she'd overheard at her mother's dinner party the night before. "Davis, you're still planning the workhouse visit tomorrow?" a gentleman had asked her father. "Every Christmas, without fail," her father had replied. "Blackwood Bank has been the chief benefactor of St. Bart's workhouse for 20 years. Tradition, you know. Load of rubbish, if you ask me," another man had muttered. "Spoiling them with treats. They should be grateful for the roof over their heads." Her father had smiled tightly. "I believe in the spirit of Christmas charity, Wellesley, and it's good business besides. The papers always report on it favourably." "Father, may I come too?" Eleanor had asked impulsively, entering the drawing room when she shouldn't have been there at all. She'd been promptly sent back to the nursery with a gentle rebuke, but not before she saw the discomfort on her father's face. Now, watching the crossing sweeper below, Eleanor wondered what the workhouse was really like. She'd heard whispers from the servants, harsh conditions, meagre food, endless work, so different from her own sheltered existence. "Miss," Sarah interrupted her thoughts, "your dress is ready." Dressed in fine blue wool with white lace at the collar and cuffs, Eleanor descended to the breakfast room. Though her parents were absent, the table was set with silver and crystal, a feast laid out on the sideboard, eggs, kippers, toast, porridge with cream, sausages and winter fruits. Eleanor took a small portion of eggs and a piece of toast, then sat alone at one end of the long mahogany table. The clock ticked loudly in the silence. Mr. Parker, the butler, entered with the mail. "Good morning, Miss Eleanor. Cook asks if the breakfast is satisfactory." "Yes, thank you," Eleanor replied automatically, though she'd barely tasted it. "Mr. Parker, do you know about the workhouse visit tomorrow?" The butler's eyebrows rose slightly. "Indeed, miss. An annual tradition for your father." "What's it like there? The workhouse?" Mr. Parker hesitated. "It's not a place you need concern yourself with, Miss Eleanor." "But I want to know," she persisted. "Father's taking gifts there, isn't he?" "Yes, miss. Food baskets, clothing, and I believe oranges for the children." Mr. Parker straightened a fork that was already perfectly aligned. "Your father is most generous." "Oranges?" Eleanor glanced at the crystal bowl in the centre of the table, filled with oranges, apples and nuts, such common things in her world. "A rare treat for the less fortunate, miss," Mr. Parker explained. "Most workhouse children taste oranges only at Christmas, if at all." Eleanor tried to imagine this, but couldn't. In her home, fruit was always available, changing with the seasons but never absent entirely. The idea that an orange could be a treasured gift seemed impossible. "I'd like to come on the visit," she announced. "Will you tell father when he returns?" "As you wish, miss," Mr. Parker replied non-committally. "Now, I believe Mrs. Wilson is waiting to discuss the decorations for tonight's tree trimming." The housekeeper, Mrs. Wilson, was indeed waiting in the drawing room, where servants were setting up an enormous fir tree in front of the bay window. At 8 feet tall, it dwarfed Eleanor, filling the air with the sharp, clean scent of pine. "Ah, Miss Eleanor," Mrs. Wilson said cheerfully, "just in time to approve the decorations. We've brought up the usual ornaments, plus the new ones your mother ordered from Germany." Boxes of treasures were being unpacked. Delicate glass baubles, carved wooden figures, gilded pine cones, and tiny candle holders that would be filled with real candles on Christmas Eve. "They're beautiful," Eleanor said, lifting a glass angel to the light. "Will we decorate today?" "This afternoon, miss. The candles will be lit after dinner, of course." Eleanor nodded, wandering among the boxes, her fingers brushed against strings of cranberries and popcorn waiting to be draped on the branches. Another box held paper cones that would be filled with sweets and hung on the tree. "Mrs. Wilson," she said suddenly, "for the workhouse visit tomorrow, what exactly does father take?" The housekeeper looked surprised by the question. "Well, let me see. Baskets with bread, ham, preserves, woolen stockings and caps, and oranges, of course, one for each child." "Just one orange?" "Yes, miss. They're quite special to those children." Mrs. Wilson busied herself arranging ornaments. "Now, about the garlands. Could we send more?" Eleanor interrupted. "More oranges, I mean, and perhaps some of the German sweets mother ordered." Mrs. Wilson's expression softened. "That's very thoughtful, miss. I'll speak to your father about it when he returns. And I want to come along tomorrow," Eleanor added firmly, "to see the workhouse for myself. I'm not sure that's—" "Please, Mrs. Wilson, it's Christmas." The housekeeper sighed. "I'll mention it to your father, but I make no promises. Now, shall we continue with the decorations?" The morning passed in a flurry of Christmas preparations. Eleanor helped the servants hang holly and ivy throughout the house, the dark glossy leaves and bright red berries bringing a touch of nature indoors. Mistletoe was suspended from the chandelier in the entryway, and pine boughs decorated the mantelpieces, filling the house with their fresh scent. In the kitchen, Cook was overseeing the making of mince pies, Christmas puddings, and a magnificent cake covered in snowy white icing. The air was rich with the smells of cinnamon, nutmeg, and brandy. "Might I try a mince pie?" Eleanor asked, peeking into the bustling kitchen. Cook, red-faced from the heat of the stoves, smiled indulgently. "Just one, mind you. The rest are for tonight's dinner and tomorrow." The pie was still warm, the pastry buttery and flaky, the filling rich with dried fruits and spices. Eleanor savoured it, thinking again of the workhouse children. Did they ever taste such things? Just before noon, the front door opened, bringing a blast of cold air and her father's commanding presence. Cornelius Blackwood was a tall man with a thick beard, now dusted with snowflakes, and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Eleanor," he exclaimed, seeing her on the stairs, "come give your father a Christmas kiss." She hurried down, inhaling his familiar scent of tobacco and cologne as he embraced her. Despite his frequent absences, she adored him completely. "Father, I want to ask you something," she said earnestly. "About tomorrow." He raised an eyebrow, handing his hat and coat to Mr. Parker. "What about tomorrow, my dear? I want to come with you, to the workhouse." Cornelius frowned, leading her into his study. Unlike the festive drawing room, this was a serious space, leather-bound books lining the walls, a massive desk dominated by ledgers and correspondence. Eleanor, the workhouse is no place for a young lady. It's difficult, the conditions, the people, But isn't that why we help them? Because their lives are difficult? She clasped her hands in front of her, a gesture her mother used when persuading father of something. I want to see where the gifts go. I want to understand. Her father studied her for a long moment. This isn't some Christmas entertainment, Eleanor. It's not like the pantomime or the shop windows at Harrods. I know that, she insisted. Please, father, it would mean so much to me. Cornelius sighed heavily, moving to the window. Below, the snow continued to fall, transforming the squalor of London into something pure and beautiful. Temporarily. Very well, he said finally, but you must stay close to me at all times. Speak only when spoken to. And remember that we are there to provide charity, not to gawk at less fortunate circumstances. Eleanor's heart leapt. Yes, father, I promise. Now, he said, his tone lightening, I believe we have a tree to decorate this afternoon. After luncheon, which her mother missed having only just risen for the day, the family gathered in the drawing room for the tree trimming. It was one of the few activities they did together as a family, a tradition Cornelius insisted upon despite Caroline's complaints that it was terribly German. The Queen and Prince Albert do it, Cornelius would always reply. If it's good enough for Victoria, it's good enough for us. Eleanor stood on a small stepladder, hanging ornaments on the higher branches, while her parents handled the more delicate decorations. The servants had strung cranberries and popcorn and attached the candle holders to the branches. Now the family added the personal touches, glass baubles from Germany, small wooden toys, gilded pine cones, and paper angels. Mother, did you know father is letting me visit the workhouse tomorrow? Eleanor said, carefully hanging a blown glass star. Caroline Blackwood, elegant even in a simple day dress, looked up with alarm. Cornelius, you can't be serious. A workhouse is no place for Eleanor. I've already agreed, Caroline, her father said firmly. It will be educational for her. Educational to see those filthy, disease-ridden... They're just children, Mother, Eleanor interrupted. Children who don't have trees like ours or oranges whenever they want them. Caroline pressed her lips together. I see your father has already filled your head with his charity notions. Next you'll be joining those dreadful women who go slumming in the East End with their pamphlets and Bibles. I just want to see where our gifts go, Eleanor said quietly. That's all. She'll be perfectly safe with me, Cornelius assured his wife. The visit is brief, just long enough to distribute the gifts and speak with the master and matron. Caroline sniffed disapprovingly, but said no more, turning her attention back to the tree. As the short winter day faded to dusk, the tree was completed except for the candles, which would be lit after dinner. Eleanor stepped back to admire their work. It was magnificent, a perfect cone of green dotted with colour and sparkle, surrounded by wrapped packages in tissue paper and ribbons. Now, Cornelius said, I believe it's time to prepare for dinner and evening church service. Upstairs, Sarah helped Eleanor change into her Christmas Eve finery, a dress of deep green velvet with a white lace collar and cuffs. Her dark hair was brushed until it shone and tied back with a matching green ribbon. You look beautiful, miss, Sarah said, adjusting the ribbon, like a Christmas angel. Eleanor studied her reflection in the mirror. The girl who looked back seemed far removed from the workhouse children she'd been thinking about all day. Would they stare at her fine clothes tomorrow? Would they hate her for her good fortune? Sarah, she said suddenly, have you ever been to a workhouse? The maid's hands stilled on her hair. Not personally, miss, no, but my cousin was sent to one after her parents died of the fever. She was just 7. What happened to her? Sarah's face grew sad. She didn't last the winter. The cold, the poor food. It's a hard life, miss. Eleanor felt her throat tighten. I'm going to visit a workhouse tomorrow with father. Are you, miss? That's unusual. I want to take something special, something from me, not just from father's charity baskets. Eleanor turned from the mirror, her mind made up. Will you help me? After dinner that evening, the family gathered again in the drawing room. Mr. Parker and 2 footmen carefully lit the candles on the tree while the family watched from a safe distance. As the tiny flames caught, the tree seemed to come alive, glowing with magical light that reflected in the ornaments and cast dancing shadows on the walls. Beautiful, breathed Eleanor, momentarily forgetting her plans for tomorrow in the wonder of the moment. Even Caroline seemed moved, her usual cool demeanour softening in the candlelight. It is rather lovely, isn't it? Cornelius put his arm around his wife's waist, pulling her close. Merry Christmas Eve, my dears. For a rare moment, they were simply a family. Mother, father, daughter, bound together by the magic of Christmas Eve. Later, after church service and a late supper, Eleanor prepared for bed, but instead of climbing under her covers, she went to her window seat again. The snow had stopped and a full moon cast silver light over London, making the snow-covered rooftops gleam. Somewhere out there, beyond Berkeley Square, beyond the fashionable West End, was St. Bart's workhouse. Somewhere, other children were going to sleep with dreams not of presents and feasts, but of a single orange. Eleanor reached under her bed, pulling out the small sack she'd prepared with Sarah's help. Inside were 6 oranges taken from the kitchen when Cook wasn't looking, and a handful of sweets wrapped in paper twists. It wasn't much, nothing compared to her own Christmas abundance. But it was something from her, not just from Blackwood Bank's official charity. Tomorrow she would see the workhouse for herself. Tomorrow she would understand a world completely different from her own. The thought made her stomach flutter with both anticipation and fear. As she finally slipped into bed, Eleanor found herself thinking of unknown children in thin blankets, cold rooms, and hard beds. For the first time in her life, her own comfort made her feel slightly guilty. Outside, the moon sailed through the winter sky, shining on rich and poor alike. Christmas was coming to all of London, though what it would bring to each child varied greatly, depending on which side of the city they called home. Christmas morning. The excited whisper rippled through the girls' dormitory before dawn had even thought about breaking. Martha opened her eyes to see Betsy's face hovering inches from her own, the little girl's breath making small clouds in the frigid air. "Is it time?" Martha whispered back, instantly awake despite the early hour. "Is it really Christmas?" "Listen," said Nancy from the next bed. "They're ringing the chapel bells." Sure enough, the distant sound of bells floated through the darkness. Christmas Day, 1853. Even in the workhouse, this was a day unlike any other. Martha sat up, hugging her blanket around her shoulders. Frost had formed intricate patterns on the inside of the windows, and the air bit at her nose and cheeks. Yet there was an energy in the dormitory that even the cold couldn't dampen. "Oranges today," she whispered to Betsy, whose eyes grew wide with anticipation. Unlike normal days, when they would be roused by Mrs. Grimwig's harsh voice, Christmas morning began with the ringing of bells. The children were allowed to wake naturally, a small mercy, but one they appreciated deeply. One by one, the girls slipped from their beds, shivering as they dressed. Their best uniforms identical to their everyday ones, but with fewer patches, and darns had been laid out the night before. They helped each other with buttons and hair, a quiet camaraderie born of shared circumstance. "Think they'll let us sing carols at breakfast?" asked Betsy as Martha braided her hair. "Probably not," said Nancy, "but definitely at dinner when the benefactors come." Martha finished the braid and gave Betsy's shoulders a squeeze. "Come on, let's go down before all the hot water's gone." The washroom was only marginally warmer than the dormitory, heated by a small stove that did little against the December chill. The girls took turns at the pump, gasping as the cold water hit their skin. Martha helped Betsy wash her face, making sure her ears were clean. The matron always checked. "Martha," Betsy asked as they dried off with rough towels, "did you ask Father Christmas for anything?" Martha hesitated. At 6, Betsy still believed. At 10, Martha knew better, but she couldn't bear to break the younger girl's heart. "I asked for a warm day," she said finally, "so we can all be comfortable for once." "I asked for a doll," Betsy confessed, "with a real china face like the one in the toy shop window we saw when we went to church last month." Martha's heart squeezed painfully. "That's a lovely wish," she said, not having the heart to explain that Father Christmas rarely brought such expensive gifts to workhouse children. The breakfast bell rang, summoning them downstairs. The dining hall had been transformed overnight. Holly and ivy decorated the walls, and a small fir branch stood in the centre of each long table, adorned with paper chains made by the children in their rare free moments. "Look," whispered Betsy in awe, "it's beautiful." It wasn't, not really. The decorations were sparse, the paper chains faded from previous years, but compared to the usual barren hall, it seemed magical. Mr. Penge stood at the head table, unusually festive in a red waistcoat. "Children," he announced, "in honour of Christmas Day, a special breakfast will be served. You may speak quietly among yourselves during the meal." A murmur of excitement spread through the room. Speaking during meals was ordinarily forbidden, punishable by loss of food privileges. This was indeed a Christmas miracle. The usual porridge was replaced by bread with a thin scraping of butter and a spoonful of treacle. To children accustomed to the blandest food, this simple change was a feast worthy of kings. "It's so sweet," marvelled Betsy, licking treacle from her lips. Martha smiled, savouring her own portion. She caught sight of Tom across the room, sitting with the other boys. He gave her their secret signal, and she returned it. They were okay. It was Christmas. After breakfast came chapel, where the children sat in rigid rows as the workhouse chaplain delivered a sermon about the Christ child born in poverty, destined for greatness. Martha tried to listen, but her mind kept wandering to the afternoon, when the benefactors would arrive with their gifts and the oranges. The morning passed with agonizing slowness. There were no work duties on Christmas Day, but the children were expected to keep themselves occupied quietly. Some of the younger ones played simple games in corners of the dining hall, while others sat in groups, talking in hushed voices about Christmases past or imagined futures. Martha found a quiet corner with Betsy and a few other girls. "Let me tell you about the Christmas before I came here," she said, drawing them close. It was a story she'd told before, but one they never tired of hearing. "We lived in 2 rooms above a baker's shop. It was always warm because of the ovens below. At Christmas, the baker would give us a loaf of special bread with raisins and cinnamon, and my father would bring home an orange." "A whole one?" asked Betsy, wide-eyed. "A whole one, just for us 3. He'd peel it ever so carefully, making sure not to tear the peel, and then he'd divide it into perfect segments. 1/3 for him, 1/3 for my mother, 1/3 for me." Martha closed her eyes, remembering, "and we'd sit by our little fire, eating our orange segments and telling stories." "What happened to them?" asked a new girl, Emma, who hadn't heard the tale before. Martha's throat tightened. "The fever. 3 years ago. First my mother, then my father a week later. Is that why you came here? You and Tom?" Martha nodded. "No other family to take us in. but we're lucky in a way. Some workhouses separate brothers and sisters completely. At least here we can see each other. A bell rang, signalling the midday meal. The children filed back into the dining hall, which had been further transformed. The long tables were now covered with white cloths, threadbare and mended, but clean, and at each place was a sprig of holly. And there, at the head table, was the Christmas pudding. Enormous and round, it sat on a platter, dark and rich, with a sprig of holly stuck in the top. The children stared at it in wonder as they took their seats. Mr. Penge stood once more. "Children, before we begin our Christmas dinner, I must remind you of the gratitude you owe to your benefactors who have provided this special meal and the gifts that will follow. I expect exemplary behaviour from each of you." Martha barely heard him. Her eyes were fixed on the kitchen door, where she could see servants carrying large trays of food. Not the usual thin soup and bread, but something that steamed and smelled of meat and vegetables. "Is that real beef?" whispered Betsy, her nose twitching like a rabbit's. Nancy leaned close. "It is. And there's potatoes too. I saw them peeling mountains of them this morning." The food was served with great ceremony. Each child received a portion of beef stew with potatoes and carrots, small by outside standards, but a feast to the workhouse children. They ate slowly, savouring every bite, making it last. Martha closed her eyes as she chewed a piece of beef, trying to remember the last time she'd tasted meat. Last Christmas, perhaps. The rich flavour was almost overwhelming after months of bland porridge and thin soup. After the main course came the pudding, carried in with great ceremony. It wasn't aflame with brandy as it might have been in a wealthy home, but the children didn't know the difference. To them, it was magnificent. Each received a small portion, dense and sweet with dried fruits and spices. Martha watched Betsy take her first bite, the little girl's eyes widening with pleasure. "It's the most delicious thing I've ever tasted," Betsy declared, her voice hushed with reverence. Martha smiled, enjoying her own portion with deliberate slowness. This moment, this rare taste of something special needed to be stretched out, savoured, committed to memory to sustain her through the lean months ahead. As they ate, a murmur of excitement began near the dining hall doors. Martha craned her neck to see what was happening. Her heart skipped a beat. They were here, the benefactors. Led by Mr. Penge, a group of well-dressed ladies and gentlemen entered the hall. They wore fur-trimmed coats and tall hats, and they carried baskets covered with cloths. Behind them came servants with more baskets, and Martha's breath caught a wooden crate, the oranges. The children stilled, watching with wide eyes as the visitors processed into the room. They were not allowed to speak unless spoken to, but a ripple of anticipation passed through them like wind through wheat. Mr. Penge cleared his throat importantly. "Children, I present Mr. Cornelius Blackwood of Blackwood Bank, our most generous benefactor, and his distinguished guests. They have come to bring you Christmas gifts." A tall man with a thick beard stepped forward. Unlike some of the other visitors who were looking around with barely disguised distaste or pity, Mr. Blackwood's expression was kind. "Merry Christmas, children," he said, his deep voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "It is my pleasure to bring you these small tokens of the season." Small tokens. Martha knew better. Whatever was in those baskets represented more luxury than the workhouse children would see for the rest of the year. And then she noticed something unusual. Standing slightly behind Mr. Blackwood was a girl about Martha's own age, dressed in a green velvet dress with a white fur muff. She was staring around the dining hall with wide eyes, taking in everything, the sparse decorations, the children in their identical uniforms, the remains of the Christmas pudding on their plates. A girl, a benefactor's daughter. Martha had never seen a child accompany the Christmas visitors before. The servants began distributing the basket's contents. Each child received a pair of woolen stockings, a cap, and an apple. More useful than exciting, but the children accepted them with genuine gratitude. Warm stockings were a treasure when you owned only one pair. Martha pulled on her new stockings immediately, sighing with pleasure at their softness. Beside her, Betsy was examining her apple with the reverence usually reserved for jewels. "It's so red," she whispered, "and shiny." But the best was yet to come. Mr. Blackwood himself stepped forward as the wooden crate was opened, revealing neat rows of oranges, bright spots of colour in the drab surroundings. "And now," he announced, "a special Christmas treat for each child." The distribution began. Each child stepped forward when their name was called, curtsied or bowed to the benefactors, and received their orange with cupped hands, as if accepting something precious beyond measure. Martha Watts called Mrs. Grimwig, reading from the ledger. Martha stood, smoothing her apron with suddenly trembling hands. She approached Mr. Blackwood, dropping into the curtsy she'd been taught. "Merry Christmas, Martha," he said kindly, placing an orange in her outstretched hands. "Thank you, sir," she replied, the ritual response she'd been taught. "God bless you for your generosity." But as she took the orange, her eyes met those of the girl in green velvet. There was curiosity in that gaze, and something else, a kind of wonder, as if Martha were some exotic creature from a distant land. The orange was heavy in her hands, its skin rough and dimpled, its colour vibrant against her pale fingers. She could already smell its citrus scent, sharp and sweet. Her mouth watered, but she wouldn't eat it yet. This treasure would be saved, prolonged, made to last. "Elizabeth Foster," Mrs. Grimwig called, and Betsy stepped forward for her turn. Martha returned to her seat, cradling her orange carefully. Around her, other children were doing the same, examining their treasures with reverent fingers, lifting them to their noses to inhale the scent. Nobody ate their orange. Not yet. This was too precious to rush. After every child had received their gift, Mr. Penge instructed them to sing carols for their benefactors. They stood in their neat rows, and their voices, thin from poor nutrition but sweet with youth, filled the dining hall with "God rest ye merry gentlemen" and "The holly and the ivy." Martha sang automatically, the familiar words coming easily, but her attention was on the girl in green velvet. She was standing slightly apart from the other visitors, watching the children with an intensity that was almost unsettling. When their eyes met again, the girl smiled hesitantly. Martha looked away quickly. It wouldn't do to be caught staring at the benefactors. Mrs. Grimwig had warned them about that. When the carols were finished, Mr. Blackwood made a short speech about charity and goodwill, which the children listened to with polite attention. Then, with a final "Merry Christmas," the visitors prepared to leave. As they filed out, Martha noticed the girl in green velvet lagging behind, looking back over her shoulder. Their eyes met one final time, and Martha had the strangest feeling that the girl wanted to say something to her. But then one of the other visitors, a woman in a fur-trimmed cloak, took the girl's arm and hurried her along. And then they were gone, leaving behind the scent of expensive perfume, the warmth of new woolen stockings, and the treasure of oranges. The remainder of Christmas Day passed in a haze of unusual leisure. The children were allowed to play quiet games in the dining hall, or to sit in groups talking. Some of the younger ones fell asleep, worn out by the excitement and the unaccustomed rich food. Martha found Tom during this free time, and they sat together in a corner, comparing their treasures. "Did you get stockings too?" she asked, showing him hers. He nodded. And a cap. It's actually warm. He touched the orange in his lap. Are you going to eat yours now? Martha shook her head. Not yet. I'm saving it. Me too. Tom looked around to make sure no one was watching, then leaned closer. I saw you looking at that girl, the one in the green dress. I wasn't looking, Martha protested. Not really. She was looking at you too. Wonder why they brought her. Martha shrugged. Maybe to show her how lucky she is, to see how the poor live. Did you see her fur muff? Bet that cost more than everything we own put together. Probably, Martha agreed, but she seemed nice. She smiled at me. Tom made a dismissive noise. They all smile on Christmas Day. It's the rest of the year they forget we exist. Martha couldn't argue with that. The benefactors came once a year, distributed their gifts, accepted the children's gratitude, and departed, their charitable duty done until next Christmas. But still, there had been something different about the girl in green velvet, something in her eyes that wasn't pity or disgust or the blank charity-minded kindness of the other visitors. As the short winter day faded to dusk, the children were given bread and cheese for their supper plain fare, but still better than usual, and sent to their dormitories earlier than normal. The excitement of the day had tired them out, and even the usually restless ones settled quickly. In the girls' dormitory, Martha sat on her bed, her orange cradled in her hands. Around her, other girls were similarly engaged, examining their treasures in the fading light. "When will you eat yours?" Betsy asked from the next bed, her own orange clutched tightly. "Not yet," Martha said. "I'm saving it for a special moment." "When?" Martha considered. "Maybe tomorrow, or the next day. I want to make it last." Nancy, more practical, had already devised a plan. "I'm going to eat half tomorrow and save half for New Year's Day. That way I get 2 treats instead of 1. The other girls nodded appreciatively at this wisdom. As darkness fell completely, Mrs. Grimwig came through to check that they were all in bed. For once, her manner was almost gentle. "Sleep well, girls," she said. "Merry Christmas." When she had gone, Martha lay in her narrow bed, the orange on her pillow beside her head. Its scent was subtle but distinct, a sweet reminder of the world outside the workhouse walls, a world of sunshine and warmth and fruit that grew on trees instead of arriving once a year in a wooden crate. She thought again of the girl in green velvet. What was her Christmas like? A tree with real candles, probably, mountains of presents, as much fruit as she could eat, any day of the year. Yet there had been something in those eyes, a kind of loneliness perhaps. It was hard to imagine that a girl with so much could feel anything but happiness. But Martha had seen something there, something familiar. Outside, snow began to fall again, dusting the windowsill with white. Martha pulled her blanket higher, grateful for her new woolen stockings keeping her feet warm. Beside her, Betsy was already asleep, her orange clutched to her chest like a doll. Despite the cold, despite the hard bed and thin blanket, despite the knowledge that tomorrow would bring a return to the usual workhouse routine, Martha felt a strange contentment. Today had been special. Today she had been given an orange, a pair of warm stockings, and a meal with real meat and pudding. And perhaps, though she hardly dared acknowledge the thought, she had made a connection, however brief, with someone from the outside world, someone who had looked at her not as a workhouse inmate, a number in a ledger, but as a girl, a person. With that comforting thought, Martha drifted into sleep, the orange's gentle scent following her into dreams of sunshine and trees laden with golden fruit. Ellen awoke to the gentle sound of Sarah drawing back her bed curtains. Outside, snow was falling again, soft flakes drifting past her window like scattered sugar. "Merry Christmas, Miss Eleanor," Sarah said, her face wreathed in smiles. "A beautiful morning, and look, Father Christmas has been..." At the foot of Eleanor's bed lay a stocking, bulging with small parcels wrapped in coloured paper and ribbon. A larger pile of presents waited on a table nearby, each one beautifully wrapped. Eleanor sat up, excitement fluttering in her stomach despite her thoughts from the night before. Christmas morning held magic even for the most troubled heart. "What time is it?" she asked, reaching for the stocking. "Just past 7, miss. Your parents aren't up yet." "But I thought you might like to open your stocking presents." Sarah busied herself at the fireplace, adding coal to the already crackling fire. Eleanor tipped the contents of the stocking onto her counterpane. Out tumbled an assortment of small treasures chocolate wrapped in silver foil, a tiny doll with a porcelain face, a kaleidoscope, hair ribbons in every colour, a wooden puzzle, and at the very bottom, an orange. She picked up the orange, turning it in her hands, just like the ones the workhouse children would receive today. Except this was just one small gift among many, not a once-a-year treasure. "Will you be going with your father to the workhouse today, miss?" Sarah asked, laying out Eleanor's Christmas dress red velvet with white lace trim, far more elaborate than yesterday's blue wool. "Yes," Eleanor replied, still looking at the orange. "Father agreed yesterday." Sarah's hand stilled for a moment. "It'll be an education for you, miss, though perhaps not a pleasant one." "What's it like, really?" Eleanor set aside the orange and looked up at her maid. "You said your cousin was in one." Sarah's face grew sombre. "It's a hard life, miss. Cold rooms, little food, endless work. The children rise before dawn and work until dark, with lessons squeezed in when they can. They wear the same uniform every day, sleep in dormitories with dozens of others, and rarely get enough to eat." She hesitated. "My cousin wrote to my mother once before she died. Said the worst part was being hungry all the time." Eleanor tried to imagine it: constant hunger, endless work, no privacy, no pretty dresses or toys or books. It seemed impossible, like something from a particularly grim fairy tale, not real life in London. "But today they get oranges," she said softly, "and stockings and caps. Father told me." "Yes, miss. Christmas is the one day of brightness in their year." Sarah turned back to the fire. "They'll remember it for months afterward." Eleanor thought about this as Sarah helped her dress and arranged her hair. The red velvet dress was new, made specially for Christmas Day, with a full skirt supported by layers of petticoats and a white lace collar that tickled her chin. Her dark hair was brushed until it shone, then tied back with a matching red ribbon. "You look beautiful, miss," Sarah said, standing back to admire her work. "Like a Christmas angel." Eleanor studied herself in the mirror. The girl who looked back was clean, well-fed, beautifully dressed, nothing like the workhouse children she'd soon meet. Would they hate her for her good fortune, or would they, like the crossing sweeper boy who sometimes smiled at her, simply accept that the world was arranged this way, with some born to plenty and others to want? Downstairs, Eleanor found the drawing room transformed by Christmas magic. The tree, lit last night with real candles, now presided over a sea of wrapped gifts. Holly and ivy adorned every surface, and a fire blazed in the grate, filling the room with warmth and the scent of burning applewood. Her father was already there, dressed in his finest morning suit, examining a book from one of his unwrapped gifts. "Merry Christmas, my dear," he exclaimed, setting aside the book to embrace her. "You look positively festive." "Merry Christmas, father," Eleanor replied, breathing in his familiar scent of tobacco and bay rum. "Are there presents to open before breakfast?" Cornelius laughed. So eager. "Yes." I believe we can open a few while we wait for your mother. She's always late on Christmas morning. It was a family joke that Caroline Blackwood, so punctual for social engagements, could never seem to rise on time for family celebrations. Eleanor suspected it was her mother's way of expressing how little she valued these moments compared to her dinner parties and charity balls. Eleanor and her father sat before the tree, and he handed her a large rectangular package wrapped in silver paper and tied with blue ribbon. "This one first, I think," he said with a smile. Eleanor carefully unwrapped it, revealing a leather-bound book with gilt edges. "The Arabian Nights," she read from the cover. "Oh, Father, thank you. I've been wanting to read these stories." "I thought you might enjoy some adventures," he said, pleased by her reaction. "Though perhaps not as adventurous as our expedition to the workhouse this afternoon." Eleanor looked up at him. "I've been thinking about that. The oranges we're taking, could we bring more? One seems so small." Cornelius's expression softened. "It's not just the orange, Eleanor. It's what it represents. Something rare, something special, something that marks Christmas as different from ordinary days. But we have bowls of oranges all winter," she persisted. "Couldn't we give each child 2 at least?" Her father sighed. "The workhouse guardians have very specific ideas about charity, my dear. Too much, they believe, will make the children discontent with their lot. It's a delicate balance. But besides," he continued gently, "we're already bringing stockings, caps and apples, as well as provisions for a special dinner. The bank makes a substantial donation each year to support the workhouse." Eleanor nodded, not entirely satisfied, but understanding that she couldn't change the system in one Christmas day. Her mother entered then, elegant in a morning dress of deep blue silk. "Merry Christmas, darlings," she said, kissing Eleanor's cheek and accepting a kiss from her husband. "I see you've started without me." "Just one present, Mother," Eleanor assured her. "Father gave me the Arabian Nights." "How educational," Caroline said without much interest. "Shall we continue? I believe there's something from Paris for you, Eleanor." The next hour passed in a flurry of unwrapping. Eleanor received more books, a new writing desk, a set of watercolours with real sable brushes, a doll from Paris with a complete wardrobe, hair ornaments, a silver locket, kid gloves, and more sweets than she could possibly eat. Each gift was met with genuine thanks, but as the pile grew, Eleanor found herself thinking about the children at St. Bart's workhouse, each receiving their 1 orange, 1 pair of stockings, 1 cap. The contrast was so stark it made her stomach tighten uncomfortably. After all the gifts had been opened, the family moved to the breakfast room. The table was laid with silver and crystal, and the sideboard groaned under the weight of the Christmas breakfast, a ham glazed with honey and studded with cloves, devilled kidneys, scrambled eggs, kippers, toast, muffins, and coffee for the adults and hot chocolate for Eleanor. Eleanor took small portions of everything, more out of politeness than hunger. The excitement of the morning had left her with little appetite, and thoughts of the workhouse visit still occupied her mind. "You're quiet this morning, Eleanor," her mother observed, delicately buttering a piece of toast. "Are you not feeling well?" "I'm fine, Mother. Just thinking about this afternoon." Caroline's expression cooled. "Ah, yes. The workhouse visit. I still think it most unsuitable for a young lady, but your father insists." "It will be educational," Cornelius said firmly. "Eleanor should understand that not everyone is as fortunate as we are." "There are more pleasant ways to learn that lesson," Caroline replied. "A visit to the charity hospital, perhaps, or one of my ladies' committees. The workhouse is so sordid." "It's reality, Caroline. for thousands of London's children. Eleanor listened to this exchange with growing discomfort. Her mother spoke as if workhouse children were a different species, something unpleasant to be kept at a distance. Her father, while more sympathetic, still viewed them primarily as objects of charity rather than as individuals. "Mother," Eleanor said suddenly, "do you think the workhouse children will like their oranges?" Caroline looked surprised by the question. "I'm sure they'll be appropriately grateful, dear, though whether they truly appreciate quality fruit is another matter. They get only one orange a year," Eleanor persisted. "At Christmas." "Yes, well, that's the point of charity, isn't it? To provide treats they wouldn't otherwise receive." Caroline sipped her coffee. "Though personally, I think practical gifts would be more useful. Sturdy shoes, for instance, or sensible undergarments." "They receive practical items as well," Cornelius interjected. "The stockings and caps are quite serviceable, and the bank's donation helps fund their education and apprenticeships when they're old enough." Eleanor fell silent again, pushing scrambled eggs around her plate. She had already decided that the 6 oranges hidden in her room would go with her to the workhouse, regardless of what her parents thought about appropriate charity. After breakfast, the family attended Christmas service at St. George's Church in Hanover Square. The church was beautifully decorated with evergreens and candles, and the choir sang carols that made Eleanor's heart swell with the beauty of it all. The sermon was about the Christ child born in poverty, destined for greatness, not unlike the sermon being delivered at that very moment in the workhouse chapel across London. Eleanor found herself wondering what the workhouse children thought about Christmas. Did they see it as a brief respite from their harsh lives? Did they resent the once-a-year charity that reminded them of all they lacked? Or did they, like her, find magic in the day despite its complications? After church came Christmas dinner, served at 2 o'clock in the dining room. The table was resplendent with the family's best silver, crystal and china. A centerpiece of holly, ivy and white chrysanthemums ran down the middle, interspersed with silver candelabra holding red candles. The meal itself was a showcase of the cook's talents and the family's wealth oyster soup to start, followed by a roast goose with all the trimmings, then a magnificent beef roast, game pies, vegetables prepared in a dozen different ways, and finally the Christmas pudding, brought in a flame with brandy and greeted with applause from the family. Again, Eleanor ate little, though she praised each dish politely. Her thoughts kept returning to the workhouse, to the children there, to their Christmas dinner, which, while special by their standards, couldn't possibly compare to this abundance. "What time are we leaving for St. Bart's, Father?" she asked as the pudding was being served. 3:30, he replied, checking his pocket watch. "The carriage is ordered for then." Caroline sighed. "I still think this is most unsuitable, Cornelius, especially on Christmas Day. Surely the bank's donation and the usual gifts would suffice without you actually going there. The personal touch matters, my dear. The workhouse master expects it, and frankly, it's good for business. The papers always mention it favourably. At least you're not taking Eleanor into the actual dormitories or workrooms," Caroline continued. "Just the dining hall for the distribution, I assume?" "Of course, it will be perfectly proper and sanitary." Eleanor listened to this exchange with growing frustration. They were discussing the visit as if it were a business transaction or a social obligation, not an opportunity to bring joy to children who had so little. "May I be excused, please?" she asked suddenly. "I need to prepare for the visit." Her parents looked surprised, but her father nodded. "Of course, my dear. We leave in an hour." Upstairs, Eleanor asked Sarah to help her prepare for the outing. The maid helped her change from her red velvet dress to ostentatious, Eleanor decided, for a workhouse visit into the blue wool from yesterday, still formal but less showy. "And I'll need my warmest cloak," Eleanor added. "And my muff." "Yes, miss. And your hat with the blue feather?" Eleanor nodded, then hesitated. "Sarah, I have something to show you." She went to her wardrobe and pulled out the small sack containing the 6 oranges and sweets she'd secreted away the night before. "I want to take these to the workhouse," she explained. "Extra oranges for some of the children, but I don't want my parents to know." Sarah's eyes widened. "Miss Eleanor, that's very kind, but if your father found out—" "He won't. I'll hide them in my muff. Please, Sarah, you told me yourself how precious an orange is to them." The maid hesitated, then nodded. "All right, miss, but be careful. The workhouse staff might not appreciate you giving extra to some children and not others." "I'll find a way," Eleanor said confidently. "I just need to get them there." Sarah helped her tuck the oranges and sweets into her muff, arranging them so they weren't obvious. The white fur was capacious enough to hide the contraband, though it made the muff heavier than usual. "There," Sarah said, adjusting Eleanor's hat. "No one would suspect a thing." "Thank you, Sarah," Eleanor said warmly. "You're a true friend." The maid blushed at this unusual familiarity. "Just doing my job, miss, and it's a kind thing you're doing. Those children have so little." Downstairs, Eleanor found her father waiting in the entrance hall, dressed in his heavy overcoat and top hat. The butler was holding a stack of wicker baskets, each covered with a cloth. "Ah, there you are," Cornelius said. "Ready for our charitable expedition?" Eleanor nodded, clutching her muff close to her body, conscious of its unusual weight. "The carriage is ready, sir," Mr. Parker announced, "and the special parcels are loaded." "Excellent." Cornelius turned to his wife, who had appeared at the top of the stairs. "We'll be back in time for evening tea, my dear." Caroline descended halfway, not bothering to come all the way down. "Do be careful, Eleanor. Those places are breeding grounds for all manner of disease." "Yes, mother," Eleanor replied, resisting the urge to roll her eyes. "I'll be careful." Outside, the family's carriage waited, a handsome black conveyance with the Blackwood crest on the door. The coachman sat up top, wrapped in blankets against the cold, while a footman stood ready to help them board. Eleanor climbed in, settling on the plush velvet seat. Her father followed, and the footman closed the door behind them. With a jerk, the carriage set off, the horses' hooves muffled by the snow covering the streets. As they travelled east from the fashionable environs of Berkeley Square, the character of London changed. The grand houses gave way to narrower streets, shops, and eventually the crowded, dilapidated buildings of the poorer districts. Eleanor peered out the window, fascinated by this part of the city she rarely saw. "Is it very far, father?" she asked as they passed through an area where ragged children played in the streets despite the cold and snow. "Not much further," he replied, watching her closely. "St. Bart's is in Smithfield, near the meat market." Eleanor observed the street scenes with growing dismay. Women in threadbare shawls hurried along the pavement, some carrying parcels or baskets, others holding the hands of small children. Men in patched coats gathered outside public houses, seeking warmth and companionship. Older children, thin and pale, darted between carts and carriages, some begging, others simply playing as children do, regardless of circumstances. "Are all these children poor, father?" she asked, her voice small. Cornelius nodded. "Many of them, yes. Though not as poor as those in the workhouse. These at least have homes and families, however humble." Eleanor thought about this. Having a home and family, even in poverty, seemed preferable to the institutional care of the workhouse. Yet, her father had told her that many workhouse children were orphans with nowhere else to go. What choice did they have? The carriage turned onto a broader street, then through a gate into a courtyard. Before them loomed St. Bart's Workhouse, a grim institutional building of grey stone, 4 stories high, with small windows and an air of cheerless efficiency. "Here we are," Cornelius said as the carriage came to a halt. "Remember what I told you, Eleanor. Speak only when spoken to, stay close to me, and remember that we are here to provide charity, not to gawk." Eleanor nodded solemnly, clutching her muff with its hidden treasures. "Yes, father." The footman opened the door, and they descended into the snowy courtyard. Servants began unloading the baskets from the back of the carriage, following as a tall, thin man in a black coat emerged from the building to greet them. "Mr. Blackwood," the man said, bowing slightly. "How good of you to come, and on Christmas Day itself. The children are most eager for your visit." "Mr. Penge," Cornelius replied, shaking the man's hand. "May I present my daughter, Eleanor? She expressed a wish to accompany me this year." Mr. Penge's eyebrows rose slightly as he looked at Eleanor. "Indeed, how unusual, but most welcome, of course. The children will be delighted to see a young lady among our visitors." Eleanor curtsied as she'd been taught, keeping her eyes modestly lowered. "Thank you for allowing me to come, sir." "The children are assembled in the dining hall," Mr. Penge continued, leading them toward the building. "We've just finished our Christmas dinner, which was most generous thanks to your donation, Mr. Blackwood." As they entered the workhouse, Eleanor was struck by the smeller combination of boiled cabbage, lye soap, and too many bodies in too little space. The corridors were clean but stark, with bare stone floors and whitewashed walls. Their footsteps echoed as they walked, making her uncomfortably aware of the sound of her own breathing. Through windows in the corridor, she caught glimpses of various rooms' dormitories with rows of narrow beds, workrooms with long tables and benches, a classroom with slates hanging on the wall. Everything was ordered, regimented, institutional. They reached a set of double doors, which Mr. Penge pushed open with a flourish. "The dining hall," he announced. Eleanor stepped inside and felt her breath catch. Before her were rows and rows of children, hundreds of them. It seemed all dressed in identical grey uniforms, all sitting in perfect stillness, all watching the doorway with wide, expectant eyes. This was the moment she had been anticipating and dreading since yesterday. This was where she would see firsthand how the other half of London lived. This was where she would meet the children who considered a single orange the height of luxury. And somewhere in that sea of grey uniforms and pale faces was a girl with whom she would forge an unexpected connection, though neither of them knew it yet. The dining hall fell utterly silent as Eleanor entered behind her father and Mr. Penge. Hundreds of eyes followed their progress, some curious, some wary, all attentive. Eleanor felt a flush creep up her neck at being the object of such scrutiny. She'd never seen so many children in one place before, let alone children who lived such different lives from her own. "Children," Mr. Penge announced, his voice echoing in the cavernous room. "As I told you earlier, we are honoured to welcome Mr. Cornelius Blackwood of Blackwood Bank, our most generous benefactor, and this year we are additionally blessed by the presence of his daughter Miss Eleanor Blackwood." A murmur rippled through the assembly at this news. A child benefactor was something new, something unexpected. Eleanor clutched her muff tighter, feeling the weight of the oranges hidden inside. Her eyes scanned the rows of faces, wondering which children she might give her secret gifts to. There were so many of them, all looking so alike in their grey uniforms. "Thank you, Mr. Penge," her father said, stepping forward. "It is my pleasure, as always, to bring some Christmas cheer to St. Bart's. The children look well, a testament to your excellent management." Eleanor glanced at the well children, noting their thin faces and shadowed eyes. If this was well, she hated to imagine what unwell might look like. "We have brought the usual gifts," Cornelius continued, gesturing to the servants who were arranging baskets at the front of the room. New stockings and caps for each child, apples, and of course the traditional Christmas orange. At the mention of oranges, Eleanor saw several children sit up straighter, their eyes brightening. She remembered what her father had said. It wasn't just the orange itself, but what it represented, a once-a-year luxury, a taste of something beyond their daily existence. The children have prepared carols to thank you for your generosity, Mr. Penge said. If you would like to be seated. Chairs had been arranged at the front of the hall for the visitors. Eleanor sat beside her father, her back straight, her hands folded in her lap over her muff. She felt conspicuous in her blue wool dress and fur-trimmed cloak, so obviously different from the children in their identical grey uniforms. At a nod from Mr. Penge, the children stood and began to sing. Their voices, thin but sweet, filled the hall with "God rest you merry gentlemen." Despite their circumstances, there was a purity to their singing that made Eleanor's throat tighten. As they sang, she scanned the rows, her gaze stopping on a girl about her own age with dark hair and serious eyes. Unlike some of the other children who stared at Eleanor with open curiosity, this girl watched her with a more measured gaze, as if trying to understand something. When the carol ended, Mr. Penge instructed the children to remain standing for the distribution of gifts. They would come forward by dormitory group, receive their gifts with a curtsy or bow, and return to their seats. The first group approached, young boys, some no older than 5 or 6. They lined up with military precision, each accepting their stockings, cap, apple, and orange with a rehearsed "Thank you, sir. God bless you for your generosity." Eleanor watched, fascinated and disturbed in equal measure. These children had clearly been drilled in the proper expression of gratitude. Their thanks seemed genuine. How could it not be when receiving such coveted items? But the uniformity of their responses felt artificial, imposed from above rather than spontaneously offered. Group after group came forward. Eleanor observed them all, but her eyes kept returning to the dark-haired girl, who was in one of the last groups to approach. There was something about her, a dignity, a spark of something that the workhouse hadn't quite extinguished. When the girls' group was finally called, Eleanor sat up straighter. The girl approached with her dormitory mates, all curtsying in unison before Mr. Blackwood. "Martha Watts," called the workhouse matron, reading from a ledger. The dark-haired girl stepped forward, dropping into a perfect curtsy. Eleanor's father placed an orange in her outstretched hands. "Thank you, sir," Martha said, her voice clear and steady. "God bless you for your generosity." As she straightened, her eyes met Eleanor's. There was a moment, brief but electric, of connection between them. Not mistress and servant, not benefactor and recipient, but simply girl and girl seeing each other across the vast divide of circumstance. Martha moved away, returning to her seat with her treasures. Eleanor watched her go, suddenly certain that this was one of the children who should receive an extra orange. The distribution continued until every child had received their gifts. None ate their oranges, Eleanor noticed. Instead, they held them carefully, as if they were made of glass, occasionally lifting them to their noses to inhale the scent. When the last child had been served, Mr. Penge invited the visitors to walk among the tables and speak with the children. This, Eleanor realised, was her chance. "Father," she said quietly, "may I walk around and talk to some of the children?" Cornelius looked surprised, but pleased. "Of course, my dear. Just remember what I told you." Eleanor nodded and stood, still clutching her muff. She moved deliberately toward the table where Martha Watts sat with other girls her age. Conscious of the many eyes following her progress, the girls fell silent as she approached, watching her warily. Up close, their poverty was even more apparent. Chapped hands, thin faces, hair cut short for practicality rather than style. "Hello," Eleanor said, suddenly shy. I hope you're having a happy Christmas." The girls murmured polite responses, clearly unsure how to interact with this unexpected visitor. Only Martha met her gaze directly. "Thank you for the oranges, miss," Martha said. "They're our favourite part of Christmas." Eleanor smiled, relieved at this opening. "Do you save them or eat them right away?" "Save them," Martha replied. "Most of us, anyway. Make them last as long as possible." "I've never had to save an orange," Eleanor admitted, then wished she hadn't when she saw the flicker in Martha's eyes. "I mean, we have them all the time. They're not special for us." An awkward silence fell. Eleanor mentally kicked herself for her tactlessness. She'd made it obvious just how different their worlds were. "Is this your first time visiting a workhouse, miss?" Martha asked finally. "Yes," Eleanor said, grateful for the question. "Father comes every year, but this is my first time." "What do you think of it?" another girl asked, smaller than Martha, with wide, curious eyes. Eleanor hesitated, unsure how to answer honestly without being offensive. "It's different from what I expected. Cleaner." This drew a few smiles. "Mr. Penge has us scrubbing from dawn till dusk," Martha said with a hint of wry humour. "Cleanliness is next to godliness, he says." "Do you go to school here?" Eleanor asked, genuinely curious. 3 hours a day, Martha explained. Reading, writing, arithmetic and Bible study. The rest is work. Cleaning, laundry, sewing for us girls. The boys do heavier work. Eleanor tried to imagine this schedule. Rising before dawn, working all day with just a few hours for lessons, eating plain food, wearing the same clothes every day. It seemed impossibly bleak. "What about play, games?" she asked. The smallest girl, Betsy, Eleanor heard another child call her, laughed outright at this. "Play? When would we do that?" "Sundays, sometimes," Martha corrected gently. "After chapel, if we've been good." Eleanor became aware that her father was watching her from across the room. She needed to act quickly if she was going to give away her secret oranges. "I have something for you," she said in a low voice, glancing around to make sure no officials were nearby. "But I can only give it to a few of you, and you must hide it until later." The girls looked at her with sudden wariness, as if suspecting a trick. Only Martha seemed more curious than suspicious. "What is it, miss?" she whispered. Eleanor opened her muff just enough to reveal one of the oranges. Extra oranges, and some sweets. I wish I could give one to everyone, but I only managed to bring 6. Martha's eyes widened. "Miss, you shouldn't. If Mr. Penge found out—" "He won't if you're careful," Eleanor insisted. "Please, I want you to have them." After a moment's hesitation, Martha nodded. "Betsy should have one, and my brother Tom, he's over with the boys." Eleanor carefully slipped an orange and a few sweets to Martha, who immediately tucked them into the pocket of her apron. She did the same for Betsy and 3 other girls at the table, each of whom received the contraband with a mixture of shock and delight. "Which one is your brother?" Eleanor asked, looking toward the boys' tables. "There," Martha pointed discreetly. "Dark hair, blue patch on his right sleeve." Eleanor nodded. "I'll try to give him one before we leave." "Why are you doing this?" Martha asked suddenly, her voice barely audible. Eleanor blinked, unprepared for the question. I just thought everyone should have a little extra at Christmas." Martha studied her face, as if searching for some hidden motive. Whatever she saw seemed to satisfy her because she nodded slightly. "Thank you," she said simply. "Eleanor," her father's voice called from across the room. "We must be going soon." "I have to go," Eleanor said regretfully, "but I'll try to give one to Tom first." She made her way toward the boys' tables, moving casually as if just touring the room. When she reached Tom's table, she paused, ostensibly to admire their new caps. "Those look very warm," she said, opening her muff just enough to slip the last orange and sweets to Tom. Merry Christmas. The boy's eyes widened as he felt the weight of the orange, but he gave no other sign of surprise. Like his sister, he had learned the art of concealment. "Thank you, miss," he said, the same rehearsed phrase he'd offered her father, but with an undertone of genuine gratitude that made her smile. Her mission accomplished, Eleanor returned to her father's side. Cornelius was deep in conversation with Mr. Penge about workhouse administration and barely noticed her return. "The donation from Blackwood Bank will cover new slates for the schoolroom," Mr. Penge was saying, "and perhaps some improvements to the laundry facilities." "Excellent, excellent," Cornelius nodded. "And the apprenticeship program for the older children? Proceeding well. 3 boys placed with a carpenter this year, 2 with a cobbler. The girls, of course, go into domestic service when they're old enough." Eleanor half listened to this exchange, her attention still on the children. They were sitting quietly with their treasures, waiting for the visitors to leave so they could, return to their normal routine? She realised she had no idea what happened in a workhouse after the benefactors departed on Christmas Day. "We've taken enough of your time, Mr. Penge," her father was saying, checking his pocket watch. "We should return home before the snow gets worse." Mr. Penge bowed. "Of course, Mr. Blackwood. The children will see you out with a final carol." At his signal, the children stood again and began singing "God Bless the Master of This House." The irony of the lyrics, usually sung to the master of a private home, not an institutional workhouse, seemed lost on everyone but Eleanor. As they sang, her eyes found Martha again. The girl was watching her with that same measured gaze, but now there was something else in it, a kind of recognition, perhaps even a tentative connection. Eleanor smiled at her, a small, private smile. After a moment, Martha smiled back. Then the carol ended, and it was time to leave. The children remained standing as the visitors filed out of the dining hall, back through the austere corridors to the entrance. Outside, the snow was falling more heavily, and the coachman had kept the horses walking in circles to prevent them from getting too cold. "Well, Eleanor," her father said as they settled into the carriage, "what did you think of your first workhouse visit?" Eleanor looked back at the grey building as the carriage pulled away. Somewhere inside were hundreds of children, each with their own story, their own hopes and fears, and among them was Martha Watts, who had looked at Eleanor as if she were a person, not just a benefactor's daughter. "It was educational," she said carefully. The children seemed grateful. Cornelius nodded, satisfied with this bland assessment. "Yes, indeed. Mr. Penge runs a tight ship. Those children are fortunate in their way. They receive education, food, shelter, more than many poor children can count on." Eleanor thought about Martha's description of their daily life. The endless work, the minimal schooling, the regimented existence. Was that really fortune, or just a different kind of misfortune than starving on the streets? "They only get oranges once a year," she said quietly. "At Christmas." Her father's expression softened. "Yes, that's why our visit is important. It gives them something to look forward to, something special in their difficult lives. Once a year, one day of slightly better food, one orange, one pair of stockings, one cap, and then back to the daily grind of work and discipline." The carriage rattled through the snowy streets, taking them back to Berkeley Square, back to their world of abundance and comfort. Eleanor gazed out the window, watching London transform as they moved from east to west, from poverty to wealth. She thought about the oranges she'd smuggled to Martha and the others, a small act of rebellion, barely a drop in the ocean of need. Yet Martha's smile, that moment of connection between them, had felt significant somehow. "Could we visit again?" she asked suddenly. "Not just at Christmas, I mean." Cornelius looked surprised. Visit the workhouse? Whatever for? To see how they're doing? To bring books, perhaps? Or... She trailed off, seeing the confusion in her father's face. My dear, the Christmas visit is a tradition, part of Blackwood Bank's charitable obligations. Regular visits would be unusual and unnecessary. The bank's donation supports the workhouse year-round. But we only see the children once a year, Eleanor persisted. How do we know if they're truly well, if they're happy? Her father frowned slightly. Their happiness is not the primary concern, Eleanor. The workhouse exists to provide for their basic needs and to train them for useful employment. It's not meant to be a place of enjoyment. Eleanor fell silent, recognizing the futility of argument. Her father, for all his generosity, saw workhouse charity as a duty, a responsibility of his position, not as a personal connection to the individual children within those walls. But she had made that connection. With Martha, with Betsy, with Tom. She had seen them as people, not just recipients of charity, and somehow she knew that changed everything. The remainder of the journey passed in silence, Eleanor lost in her thoughts, her father apparently content with their charitable excursion. When they arrived home, Caroline was waiting in the drawing room, ready with questions about their visit. Was it dreadful? She asked, wrinkling her nose. All those poor children in one place. The smell must have been atrocious. It was perfectly fine, Caroline, Cornelius replied, accepting a cup of tea from the butler. The children were well behaved and appropriately grateful, and Eleanor conducted herself admirably. Did you, darling? Caroline turned to her daughter. You weren't frightened by it all? No, Mother, Eleanor said, removing her cloak and hat. It was interesting. Interesting, what a curious word to use. Well, I suppose it's done now, and you've learned your lesson about how fortunate you are. Had she learned that lesson? Eleanor wondered as she sipped her tea. Yes, she had seen firsthand the stark contrast between her life and those of the workhouse children. But she'd learned something else too, something her mother would probably never understand. That beneath the surface, differences of circumstance, there was a fundamental sameness. Martha Watts, despite her grey uniform and workhouse upbringing, was a girl not so different from Eleanor herself. May I be excused? She asked, setting down her teacup. I'm rather tired after all the excitement. Her parents nodded, and Eleanor made her escape, climbing the stairs to her bedroom where Sarah was waiting to help her change for dinner. How was it, miss? The maid asked eagerly, unfastening Eleanor's dress. The workhouse. Different than I expected, Eleanor replied thoughtfully. The children were real. Does that sound strange? I mean, I knew they existed, but seeing them, talking to them, not strange at all, miss, Sarah assured her. That's how it is with people. Hard to imagine them properly until you've met them face to face. I gave away the oranges, Eleanor confided, to a girl named Martha and her friends, and her brother Tom. Sarah smiled. That was kind of you, miss. It wasn't enough, Eleanor said, frustrated. 6 oranges for hundreds of children, and they live there all year, not just at Christmas. They work all day, they have hardly any time for lessons or play, they wear the same clothes every day. Miss Eleanor, Sarah interrupted gently, you can't change the whole world, but you made a difference to Martha and Tom and their friends today. Sometimes that's all any of us can do. Eleanor nodded, but her mind was already racing ahead. Maybe she couldn't change the whole system, but perhaps there were other small things she could do. Between 1870 and 1900, over 1 million domestic servants worked in America's grandest homes, enduring 17-hour days, brutal labour, and complete loss of personal freedom. Their hands were permanently damaged from harsh chemicals, their bodies broken by endless work, yet they made the Gilded Age's opulence possible through invisible sacrifice. Here's what life was really like for America's forgotten servant class. Before we start, likes and subscribes help me keep making these. Where are you listening from? Drop your city and time in the comments. I'm always reading them thinking, wait, people in New Zealand listen to history stories to sleep. Okay, tonight it's the Gilded Age, but before we go anywhere, get cozy, like actually cozy. Pillows good? Blanket situation handled? Perfect. Trust me on this one. You stand at the edge of a world dripping with wealth and staggering inequality. It's 1885 and you're shivering, not just from the November chill biting through your thin wool coat, but from nerves. You're clutching a small battered suitcase containing everything you own in the world. 2 dresses, a nightgown, some undergarments, a hairbrush, and a faded photograph of your family back in Ireland. The mansion looms above you, 5 stories of imposing limestone and countless windows, each one like a judging eye. This is the Henderson family home, one of New York's finest addresses, and you, Mary Callahan, age 16, are about to become its newest and lowest ranking servant. Your stomach's not just empty, it's eating itself. You haven't had anything but a crust of bread since yesterday morning. The hunger makes your head light, your thoughts fuzzy around the edges, but there's no time for that now. You've come too far to turn back. You take a deep breath and approach the service entrance. Not the grand front doors with their gleaming brass fixtures, but a narrow, unassuming door tucked away on the side of the house. Your potential salvation and prison all in one. Wait, so this isn't the main entrance? You might be thinking. No, it absolutely is not, and you'd better get used to that right now. The service entrance might as well be in another dimension compared to the front door. You'll learn that immediately. Servants and family members exist in parallel universes that overlap physically but never ever socially. You raise your hand to knock, but before you can, the door swings open. A woman stands there, her face stern as a winter morning, her black dress impeccably pressed, a ring of keys hanging at her waist. This is Mrs. Wallace, the housekeeper, though you don't know that yet. She looks you up and down, her gaze calculating, assessing, almost surgical in its precision. Mary Callahan? She asks, her voice crisp as autumn leaves. Yes, ma'am, you respond, trying to keep the tremor from your voice. You're late, she says, though you're not. You're exactly on time, but you'll quickly learn that in service, on time is already late. Come in then, and wipe your feet thoroughly. I won't have you tracking dirt into my house, not the Hendersons' house. Hers. That's your first lesson about Mrs. Wallace. In her mind, she doesn't work for the house works for her, and so will you. The smell hits you first as you step inside. Beeswax and lemon oil from endless polishing, the faint lingering scent of yesterday's roast, and something else, something distinctly human, the close quarters of many bodies living together, working together, sweating together. It's not unpleasant, just concentrated humanity. The narrow service corridor is dim compared to the bright autumn day outside, and it takes your eyes a moment to adjust. The walls are bare, practical, no fancy wallpaper here, no decorative mouldings, just plain painted walls and a simple wooden floor worn smooth by countless servant footsteps. You'll be a scullery maid, Mrs. Wallace says, already walking briskly ahead, expecting you to follow. Lowest position for females in the household. You'll report to Mrs. Collins, the cook. Your duties include washing dishes, scrubbing pots, cleaning the kitchen, peeling vegetables, hauling coal, and whatever else is required of you. She doesn't slow her pace as she continues. You'll be paid $3 per month with room and board provided. Half your wages will be held until the completion of your first year of service. If you leave before then, you forfeit that amount, $3 a month. To put that in perspective, the dress Mrs. Henderson will wear to dinner tonight cost $200, and people wonder why I'm still angry about wealth inequality. Your half-day off is Thursday afternoons from 2 o'clock until 9 in the evening, provided all your work is complete. You are expected to attend church on Sundays. The family is Episcopalian. I assume you're Catholic? Yes, ma'am, you say. She sighs. There's a Catholic church 6 blocks away. You may attend early mass provided you're back in time to help with breakfast. You're led through a maze of back corridors and up a narrow staircase. The servants' stairs, built specifically so the family and their guests never have to witness the mechanics of their luxury. These stairs are steep and cramped, nothing like the grand central staircase you glimpsed through an open door. Up and up you climb, past the family's floors, past the main bedrooms, up to the very top of the house, the attic. Mrs. Wallace pushes open a door, revealing a small spare room with slanted ceilings following the roofline. There are 3 narrow beds crammed into the space, each with a small trunk at its foot. This is where you'll sleep, she says. You'll share with Annie and Catherine, the other scullery maids. That's your bed there. She points to the one directly under the small window. The mattress is thin, the blanket rough wool, but it's a bed and it's yours, and after weeks of uncertainty following your arrival in America, that means something. The house rises at 5. You'll be expected in the kitchen at 5:30 to help light the fires and begin breakfast preparations. Uniform is provided. She gestures to a folded stack on your bed. Black dress, white aprons, white caps. You're to keep it clean and pressed. Any questions? You have 1,000 questions, but you shake your head. Good. Change into your uniform and report to the kitchen. Mrs. Collins will be expecting you. And with that, she's gone, leaving you alone in a strange room, in a strange house, about to begin a strange new life. Let me tell you something. That uniform, it's not just clothes, it's the physical manifestation of your new identity. The moment you put it on, you stop being just Mary Callahan. You become the scullery maid. And trust me, it feels different. The fabric is rough cotton, scratchy against your skin. The dress is black, the universal servant colour that shows the least dirt, even though it shows every speck of dust. The apron is starched so stiffly it could probably stand up on its own. And the cap, that seemingly innocent little white cap, it's actually the ultimate symbol of servitude. It marks you, brands you. It's the difference between being a person and being a function. You change quickly, your fingers fumbling with unfamiliar buttons and ties. The uniform doesn't quite fit. It's a bit large, clearly made to be worn by different girls of different sizes as they cycle through the position. You'll learn to take it in yourself later. Servants have to be handy with a needle. Your normal clothes go into the small trunk at the foot of your bed. You catch a glimpse of yourself in a small spotted mirror hanging on the wall. You hardly recognise yourself. The girl from County Cork is gone, replaced by an anonymous figure in black and white. Now, while you're getting used to this bizarre new reality, let me paint you a picture of what you've just walked into. Because the America of 1885 isn't just different from your world. It's an entirely separate universe. This is the height of what we call the Gilded Age, named by Mark Twain to describe something that appears golden and glittering on the surface, but is actually made of cheaper material underneath. It's the perfect metaphor for this period of American history. The Civil War has been over for 20 years, and the country's industrial capacity has exploded. Railroads crisscross the nation, steel production is booming, oil has been discovered in Pennsylvania, and all of this industrialization is creating wealth on a scale never before seen. But here's the thing. This wealth isn't being distributed evenly, not even close. The richest 1% of Americans control about 25% of the total wealth, and the top 10%, they've got about 75% of everything. Sound familiar? Massive fortunes are being built by men whose names you'd still recognize today. Rockefeller, Carnegie, Vanderbilt, Morgan, these are the titans who are reshaping America for better and worse. Meanwhile, the average industrial worker makes about $500 a year, working 60 hours a week in often dangerous conditions. There's no social safety net, no worker protections, no minimum wage, no child labour laws, and servants like you, you're making a fraction of even that. You're $36 per year. Before the half they withhold is equivalent to about $1,000 in today's money, for what will amount to at least 80 hours of work per week. That's about 24 cents per hour in today's money. But here's the weird thing. Domestic service is actually considered one of the better jobs available to women in 1885. The alternatives are factory work, even lower pay, more dangerous conditions, agricultural labour, backbreaking, seasonal, or, well, the oldest profession. At least as a servant you have food, shelter, and a degree of respectability. It's a devil's bargain, but it's one that millions of women like you are making. You take a deep breath and head downstairs to find the kitchen. The house is a labyrinth, but you follow the smell of baking bread and the sound of clattering pots. The kitchen, when you find it, is a hive of activity. It's hot, almost unbearably so, from the massive coal range that dominates one wall. The air is thick with steam and the mingled aromas of roasting meat, simmering stocks, and fresh herbs. At the centre of this controlled chaos stands Mrs. Collins, the cook. She's a formidable woman, not just in authority, but in physical presence. Her face is flushed from the heat, her arms solid muscle from years of wrestling heavy pots and pounding dough. "You the new girl then?" she asks when she spots you hovering uncertainly in the doorway. "Yes, ma'am, Mary Callahan." She looks you up and down, much as Mrs. Wallace did, but her assessment is different. She's not checking your deportment, she's gauging your strength, your potential usefulness. "Ever work in a kitchen before?" "Only at home, ma'am. For my mother." She snorts. "Well, this isn't your mother's kitchen, come here." She leads you to a deep stone sink where a mountain of dirty pots, pans, and dishes awaits. "This is yours," she says, gesturing to the sink. "You'll wash everything. The water pump is there. Hot water comes from the copper boiler next to the range. Soap is here, lye for the tough bits, scrub brush, rags, towels for drying." It looks simple enough, but as you'll soon discover, washing dishes for a household of this size is no small task. Each meal generates dozens of dishes, and in a house like this, there are many meals: breakfast, lunch, tea, dinner, and often late-night snacks for the family or their guests. "When you're done with these, come find me," Mrs. Collins says. "There are vegetables to be peeled for tonight's dinner." And so begins your first day as a scullery maid in one of New York's grand homes. Your hands plunge into hot, soapy water, the first of countless thousands of times they'll make this journey. The water is scalding, your skin turns pink almost immediately. But you don't complain, you can't complain, this is your job now. The pots are heavy, awkward to manoeuvre in the sink, cast iron skillets encrusted with burned-on food, copper pans that need special care to maintain their shine, silver-plated serving dishes that must be handled carefully to avoid dents or scratches. Your back begins to ache from leaning over the sink. Your fingers prune and then start to crack from the harsh lye soap. Wait, did I just say lye soap? Yes, actual lye, as in sodium hydroxide, as in the stuff that can literally dissolve a body. You're plunging your bare hands into it multiple times a day, and there are no rubber gloves in 1885, by the way, just your skin versus industrial strength caustic chemicals. Fun times. You're too slow. comes a voice beside you. You turn to see another girl in the same uniform as yours, perhaps a year or two older. "I'm Catherine. You must be the new girl." "Mary," you say, wincing as the soap finds a small cut on your finger. "You need to be faster," Catherine says, not unkindly. "Mrs. Collins won't like it if you're still washing breakfast dishes when it's time to start lunch. Here, let me show you." She demonstrates a more efficient method, stacking similar items, tackling the greasiest pots first while the water is hottest and cleanest using the right amount of soap and lye. "Your hands will toughen up," she says, noticing your discomfort. "Mine used to bleed every day when I first started. Now look." She holds up her hands and you're shocked at the transformation. They're red, chapped, the skin thickened and calloused, the nails short and broken. These are not a young woman's hands anymore. They're work tools, adapted to their function. You're looking at your future and it's written in cracked skin and broken nails. "How long have you been here?" you ask. 2 years, Catherine says. "Started when I was 14. And do you like it?" The question feels naive, even as you ask it. Catherine gives you a look that's equal parts pity and amusement. "Like doesn't enter into it," she says. "It's a job, better than the factory. My sister works at the textile mill downtown, lost 2 fingers last year when her hand got caught in a loom. That puts things in perspective." "The food's good here," Catherine continues. "Mrs. Collins is fair, even if she shouts sometimes. Mrs. Wallace is strict but not cruel, and the Hendersons," she shrugs. "They're rich people. They barely notice we exist, which is better than the ones who notice for the wrong reasons, if you take my meaning." You do, unfortunately. You've heard stories from other girls who came to America before you, stories about masters who took liberties with the female staff. It's a relief to hear that's not a concern in this household, at least. Anyway, finish these quick, Catherine says. "The delivery cart will be here soon with the meat for tonight, and we'll need to help bring it in." As if on cue, a bell on the wall jingles, one of many in a row, each labelled with a different room of the house. "That's the front door," Catherine says. "Annie will get it." Another girl, presumably Annie, hurries past, straightening her apron as she goes. She's small, maybe 17, with a pinched face and quick, nervous movements. The kitchen, you're learning, is the beating heart of the house. Everything revolves around it. The meals, yes, but also the rhythms of the day, the comings and goings, the gossip and news. Mrs. Collins might be lower in the servant hierarchy than Mrs. Wallace or Mr. Peterson, the butler whom you haven't met yet. But in this domain, she's sovereign. And you, the scullery maid, are at the absolute bottom of this miniature society. Everyone outranks you. Everyone can give you orders. Your time is not your own. Your body is not your own. Your labour belongs to the Hendersons, purchased for $3 a month, and the privilege of sleeping in their attic. This life, this constrained, demanding, physically punishing life, is what millions of women endured during the Gilded Age. Their stories are largely unwritten, their experiences unrecorded. They were the invisible engine that powered the lavish lifestyles of America's new aristocracy. You'll be up before dawn tomorrow, working until well after dark. You'll wash mountains of dishes, scrub floors on your hands and knees, haul coal and water, empty chamber pots, peel endless vegetables, and do it all without complaint, without rest, without recognition. And somewhere above you, the Hendersons will glide through their beautiful rooms, attend their elegant parties, and never once think about the army of people below stairs who make it all possible. Behind every fortune, every mansion, every silk gown and diamond necklace, there were dozens of women like you, hands raw, backs aching, youth fading, whose labour created the illusion of effortless luxury. As you finish the last pot and reach for a towel to dry your red-throbbing hands, Catherine glances at the clock. "Almost time to start preparing for lunch," she says. "Better hurry with those vegetables Mrs. Collins mentioned." And so your day continues, one task flowing into the next without pause, without rest. The vegetables need peeling: potatoes, carrots, turnips, onions, pounds and pounds of them, enough to feed the family and their frequent guests, plus the staff of 15 who keep the household running. Your fingers, already tender from the hot water and harsh soap, now face a new challenge. The knife slips on a wet potato, nicking your thumb. You wince but keep working. Blood mixes with vegetable peels. In a house like this, the work doesn't stop for minor injuries. By the time lunch preparations are in full swing, you've been on your feet for hours. Every muscle aches, your lower back throbs from leaning over the sink, your shoulders burn from the repetitive motion of scrubbing, your stomach growls. You still haven't eaten today. Staff lunch is after the family's, Catherine informs you when she notices you eyeing a freshly baked loaf of bread. "We eat what's left." What's left turns out to be substantial. The Hendersons, like most wealthy families, order far more food than they actually consume. Staff meals are simple but filling. Today it's soup made from yesterday's roast, bread, cheese and apples. You eat quickly, standing up in the kitchen rather than sitting in the servants' hall. There's no time for a proper break. The dishes from the family's lunch are already arriving, and they'll need washing before dinner preparations begin in earnest. As you settle into your work rhythm, you start to notice the other members of the household staff. There's Mr. Peterson, the butler, a tall, imposing figure who manages the male staff and oversees the wine cellar and dining room. He barely glances at you. Scullery maids are so far beneath his notice that you might as well be furniture. There's Mrs. Wallace, of course, who seems to materialise whenever something isn't being done to her exacting standards. Her keys jingle as she moves through the house, a constant reminder of her authority. There are the footmen, William and Thomas, tall, handsome young men, selected as much for their appearance as their skills. They serve at table, answer doors, carry heavy items, and generally act as the visible face of service in the household. There's Agnes, the head housemaid, who supervises the cleaning of the family's rooms, and Lily, the parlour-maid, responsible for the drawing room and public spaces, and Margaret, the lady's maid, who attends directly to Mrs. Henderson, helping her dress and styling her hair. Each person has their specific role, their territory, their place in the rigid hierarchy, and everyone has more status than you. The afternoon passes in a blur of tasks. The kitchen grows hotter as dinner preparations begin in earnest. Mrs. Collins orchestrates a complex dance of roasting, boiling, baking and sauce making. You're called upon to fetch ingredients, stir pots, mind the fire in the range, all while continuing to wash the endless stream of dishes, pots and utensils that cooking generates. The bell wall springs to life as the family moves through their day, each chime summoning a different servant to a different room. The front doorbell for visitors, the drawing room bell for tea, the master's study bell for correspondence. The bells never stop, and neither does the work. By 6 o'clock, your feet are swollen in your ill-fitting shoes. Your back spasms periodically from being hunched over for so long. Your hands are raw, red patches where the skin has started to crack and peel from constant exposure to hot water and lye. But dinner service is beginning, and this is the most important meal of the day in a house like this. The Hendersons are entertaining guests, another wealthy family and a business associate of Mr. Henderson's. The dining room has been prepared, the silver polished, the crystal gleaming, the damask tablecloth perfectly pressed. You catch a glimpse of the room as you help carry some of the prepared dishes to the butler's pantry, where Mr. Peterson will oversee their final presentation. The sight nearly stops you in your tracks. The dining room is a cathedral to wealth. A massive table dominates the space, set with fine china, sterling silver and crystal that catches the light from the chandelier above. Fresh flowers in silver vases run down the centre of the table. The chairs, upholstered in rich burgundy silk, await the family and their guests. It's another world, a world you serve but will never be part of. Dinner in a house like this isn't just a meal, it's a performance. Course after course emerges from the kitchen: oysters, soup, fish, roast, game, salad, cheese, dessert, fruit, each requiring its own dishes, its own serving pieces, its own choreography of service. And every single item used, every fork, knife, spoon, plate, glass, serving dish will eventually make its way to your sink. As the family dines in splendour, the kitchen reaches a fever pitch of activity. Mrs. Collins shouts orders, sauces are finished, garnishes applied, plates wiped clean of any errant drops or smudges. The footmen come and go, carrying full platters up and empty ones back down. You're already washing the dishes from the early courses, trying to stay ahead of the flood that will come when dinner concludes. Your arms are submerged to the elbows in hot, soapy water. Your fingers have gone pruny, then raw, then numb. Through the open kitchen door you can hear faint laughter from above. The family and their guests enjoying their meal, their wine, their conversation. Do they ever think about the hands that prepared their food, the hands currently washing their dishes, the lives being spent in their service? No, they don't. Because that's not how the world works. Not in 1885, and honestly, not that much has changed today. By the time the last dessert plate comes down, it's nearly 10 o'clock. You've been working for over 14 hours. Your body has moved past pain to a sort of dull, persistent ache that seems to radiate from your very core. Almost done, Catherine says, as she helps you with the final round of washing up. Just need to clean and bank the range for the night, scrub the kitchen floor, and set out the early morning provisions for breakfast. It's another hour before you're finally able to climb the narrow servant stairs to the attic room. Catherine and Annie trudge beside you, equally exhausted. None of you has the energy for conversation. The room is cold. Heat rises, but not all the way to the attic, especially not in a house the size of the Hendersons. You can see your breath in the chilly air. The single window provides minimal ventilation, and the space holds the mingled scents of 3 working women: sweat, laundry soap, hair oil, and the kitchen smells that cling to your clothes and skin. You change quickly in the cold, stripping off your uniform and pulling on your nightgown. There's no privacy, but you're all too tired to care. The day has scoured away any sense of modesty or self-consciousness. As you sink onto your thin mattress, pulling the rough wool blanket up to your chin, you realise this is it. This is your life now. Tomorrow will be the same, and the day after, and the day after that. Your eyes close almost immediately, your body surrendering to exhaustion, but sleep comes with the knowledge that the bell will ring at 5 and it all begins again. This was the reality for countless women during America's Gilded Age. Invisible workers who made possible the visible splendor, human machinery maintaining the illusion of effortless luxury. Their stories deserve to be told. The bell seems to ring about 30 seconds after you've closed your eyes, though in reality it's been 5 hours, 5 precious hours of sleep that vanish like smoke as Catherine shakes your shoulder. Up, she says simply, can't be late. Your body protests with every movement. Muscles you didn't know you had are screaming from yesterday's labour. Your hands throb, the cuts and cracks have stiffened overnight, and fresh pain blooms as you flex your fingers. But there's no time to coddle yourself, no time to ease into the day. The attic room is dark and freezing cold. November in New York, and there's no heat up here. Of course there isn't. Heat costs money, and no one wastes money on servant comfort. Your breath makes little clouds in the air as you hurry to dress. Wash quick, Annie advises, nodding to a ceramic basin on the small washstand. The water in it is ice cold and barely enough to splash your face and hands. There's a communal towel, already damp from the other girls. No privacy, no comfort, no concessions to dignity. "Bathroom's down the hall," Catherine says, noting your confusion. "But there's no time in the morning. You can use it tonight before bed." Maybe, because even basic bodily functions are subject to the demands of the household schedule. The three of you dress quickly in the dark, fumbling with buttons and ties. There's a rhythm to it, a practiced efficiency that you lack but will soon develop. No one speaks much. Morning comes too early for conversation. You follow the others down the narrow servant stairs, your hand trailing along the wall for guidance in the dim light. The house is quiet at this hour. The family won't rise for several more hours, but the service areas are already coming to life. The kitchen, when you reach it, is cold and dark. The great range that dominated the space yesterday is now a slumbering beast that needs awakening. This, you quickly learn, is your first task of the day. "Coal," Catherine says, pointing to a scuttle. "Fill it from the bin in the back, then lay the fire. Mrs. Collins will be down soon, and she'll want the range hot." The coal bin is in a small courtyard behind the kitchen. You step outside into the pre-dawn darkness, the cold hitting you like a physical blow. The city is quiet at this hour. No carriages on the streets yet, no vendors calling their wares, just the distant sound of factory whistles calling the earliest shift workers. The coal is heavy, the scuttle awkward to manage. You fill it as full as you can lift, then stagger back inside. Your arms strain with the weight. Coal dust smudges your clean uniform, works its way under your fingernails, into the cracks in your skin. It burns. Laying the fire in the range is an art you don't yet possess. The kindling goes on top of crumpled newspaper, the coal arranged to allow for airflow. Your first attempt fails. The paper burns, but the coal doesn't catch. "Not enough kindling," comes a voice from the doorway. Mrs. Collins has arrived, her face a mask of early morning irritation. Start again, and be quick about it. You rebuild the fire, adding more kindling this time, arranging the coal more carefully. Your hands shake slightly, not just from the cold, but from the awareness that you're being watched, judged. When the fire finally catches, the relief is palpable. "Now, the copper," Mrs. Collins says, nodding to a large boiler attached to the side of the range. "We'll need hot water for breakfast preparations." You fill the copper from the pump, another heavy, awkward task, then turn your attention to the rest of the kitchen. There are lamps to be lit, surfaces to be wiped down, yesterday's ashes to be removed from the range. By the time the first pale light of dawn filters through the kitchen windows, you've been working for an hour and breakfast preparations are in full swing. The kitchen has transformed from a cold, dark cave to a hive of bustling activity. Mrs. Collins kneads bread dough with practiced movements, her strong arms working the mass into submission. Catherine chops ham for the family's breakfast, the knife moving at a speed that makes you nervous. Annie sets up the coffee service, measuring beans into the grinder. And you're peeling potatoes for hash, your fingers clumsy with cold and fatigue. The knife slips again, nicking your already damaged hand. You wince but keep working. Blood mingles with potato starch. Yesterday's lesson already learned. The work doesn't stop for minor injuries. "Faster," Mrs. Collins says, glancing at your slow progress. The family breaks their fast at 8, and we've still got eggs, muffins, and porridge to prepare. You pick up the pace, ignoring the stinging in your hands. The potatoes need to be diced next, then into a cast-iron skillet with onions and the ham Catherine is chopping. The smell makes your empty stomach growl audibly. Staff breakfast after the families, Mrs. Collins reminds you, though not unkindly. There's tea there if you want it. She nods to a pot on the corner of the range. The tea is strong, bitter and scalding hot. It burns your tongue but sends a wave of blessed warmth through your tired body. You drink it gratefully, not even minding the absence of milk or sugar. The kitchen settles into a choreographed dance of breakfast preparation. Each person has their role, their tasks, their space. You're still learning the steps, still bumping into others, still getting in the way, but there's a certain beauty to it, a functional harmony that emerges from necessity and repetition. At precisely 7:30, the first bell of the day rings. Mr. Henderson's dressing room. The day officially begins. "That'll be Mr. Peterson," Mrs. Collins says, nodding to the bell. He takes the master his morning tea. As if summoned by his name, the butler appears in the kitchen doorway. Mr. Peterson is tall, his posture perfect, his expression perpetually solemn. His black suit is immaculate, his white shirt starched within an inch of its life. He's the very picture of dignity in service. "Good morning, Mrs. Collins," he says, his voice as crisp as his appearance. "The master's morning tea, if you please." "Ready and waiting, Mr. Peterson," Mrs. Collins replies, gesturing to a silver tray already prepared with a pot of tea, a cup and saucer, and a small plate of thin toast. Mr. Peterson inspects the tray with a critical eye, adjusts the position of the cup slightly, then lifts it with the effortless grace of long practice. He doesn't acknowledge you or the other junior staff. In the servant hierarchy, he might as well be royalty compared to a scullery maid. After he leaves, the pace in the kitchen accelerates. More bells begin to ring as the family wakes. Maids hurry up and down the stairs, carrying hot water for washing, removing chamber pots. Yes, that's your job too, emptying the family's night soil, preparing rooms for the day. The breakfast dishes emerge from the pantry, fine bone china, delicate cups, silver serving pieces. Everything must be perfect, everything must be hot, everything must be ready exactly on time. At 8 o'clock, the family sits down to breakfast in the morning room, a light-filled space designed specifically for this meal. You get a glimpse of it as you help carry dishes up from the kitchen. Pale yellow walls, white mouldings, a table set with fresh flowers and gleaming silver. You also get your first look at the Hendersons themselves. Mr. James Henderson is in his 50s, a solidly built man with mutton chop whiskers and the confident bearing of someone who has never questioned his place in the world. He made his fortune in railways and banking, expanding the modest business he inherited from his father into a small empire. Mrs. Eleanor Henderson is perhaps 10 years younger than her husband, still beautiful in a carefully maintained way. Her morning dress is simpler than her evening attire, but still costs more than you'll make in a year. Her hair is already perfectly arranged, courtesy of Margaret, her lady's maid. Their children are present as well. Miss Louise, 19 and preparing for her second season in society, and Master William, 17 and home from boarding school for a short visit. They speak little during breakfast, confining their conversation to plans for the day ahead. Mr. Henderson will be at his office downtown. Mrs. Henderson has calls to make and a committee meeting for some charity function. Miss Louise has a fitting for a new gown. Master William is meeting friends for lunch at their club. Not once do they acknowledge the servants who move silently around them, refilling coffee cups, removing empty plates, anticipating needs before they're expressed. You and the other staff are furniture to them, functional objects that enable their comfortable lives. "Toast!" Mrs. Henderson says simply, not looking up from the letter she's reading, and instantly William the footman presents the toast rack for her selection. "The eggs are tepid," Miss Louise complains, poking at her plate with a silver fork. "I'll have fresh ones prepared immediately, miss," William responds, whisking the offending plate away, and just like that, your carefully prepared breakfast service is thrown into chaos. Mrs. Collins must drop everything to make fresh eggs. You must wash the rejected plate and cutlery immediately so they can be reused. The entire kitchen scrambles to correct this small imperfection in Miss Louise's morning. "Rich people," Catherine mutters under her breath as she helps you quickly wash and dry the returned plate. God forbid her eggs are less than scalding. It's your first real glimpse of the fundamental truth of service. The comfort, preferences and whims of the family always come first. Your time, your labour, your fatigue are irrelevant. You exist to smooth their path through life, to create the illusion that hot food appears by magic. Clean clothes materialise in wardrobes, dust never settles on surfaces, and chamber pots empty themselves. By 9:30 the family has finished breakfast and dispersed to their various activities. Only then can the staff eat. The kitchen table is quickly set with the breakfast leftovers: eggs, bacon, toast, porridge. The food is no longer hot, but it's plentiful. You sit with Catherine, Annie, and the other lower servants. The upper servants, Mr. Peterson, Mrs. Wallace, Mrs. Collins, and the lady's maid, eat separately in Mrs. Wallace's sitting room, maintaining the hierarchy even during meals. "Eat quick," Catherine advises between bites. "We've got to clear all this, wash everything, and start on lunch preparations." You're starving after hours of work on just a cup of tea, and the food disappears rapidly. It's your first proper meal since arriving, and despite the simplicity, it tastes wonderful. You hadn't realised how hollow with hunger you felt until now, but Catherine is right. There's no time to linger. The breakfast dishes are waiting and the cycle begins again. Wash, dry, put away, clear, clean, prepare. The rhythm of the household continues its relentless forward motion. As you settle into the familiar position at the sink, arms deep in hot, soapy water, Catherine works beside you, showing you more efficient methods, helping you keep pace with the never-ending flow of dishes, pots and pans. "Mrs. Wallace will be doing room inspections this morning," she tells you as you work. "Be glad you're down here. She's a terror when she's inspecting. Poor Agnes was in tears yesterday over a bit of dust under Mr. Henderson's bed." "Does she inspect our room too?" you ask, thinking of the small attic space you share. Catherine snorts. "Not likely. She doesn't care how we live as long as we keep the family's rooms perfect. Our quarters could be a pigsty for all she notices." There's a strange freedom in that neglect, you realise. The attic room may be small, cold and plain, but at least it's a space where the exacting standards of the household don't apply. A tiny pocket of autonomy in a life otherwise completely controlled by others. As the morning progresses, you fall into a rhythm